it does just feel like, okay, it's like it just feels like the claws of capitalism will catch you no matter how fast you run or no matter how many new pathways you find. They're going to follow you, they're going to get ahead of you, and they're going to take over it.
One of the biggest musicians on the planet, Ed Sheeran, was busking in India as part of his mathematics tour. He shocked fans showing up in a public space to busk on the street ahead of his show, and whilst performing, he was interrupted and shut down by the local police.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
Sorry, okay. I've jumped the gun. So, you're going to love this.
I'm now ready to hear your story.
It's almost like a joke with a drawn-out punchline, but it's just real, and it's me. I'm just going to use this as a segue. But this is a true story, and it happened to me today. And it's not really like a story insofar as I'm just describing just like something, I don't know. Anyway, I digress already. We're 10 seconds in, and I'm digressing.
Strap yourselves in. It's going to be a long one.
So today I was at work. We're at Redhead. We're building a brand new house. We're recording this on Monday, and people who live in the Sydney, basically the east coast of New South Wales, or at least the middle to lower east coast of New South Wales, would be aware that on this Monday there was a lot of rain, and we had a crane booked to lift trusses onto the second story of a house, right? So I was like, oh, you know, weather needs to play ball, and it did, which was great. So we got the lift done, and not long after it started to rain and got very wet, and we just went, we'll can it. You know, we're not doing that in the weather, so we canned it. And I'd gotten quite wet. Anyway, I had another little job to go up and do up at Stockton, a bit further north. And the whole time I was driving there, you know, when I was sweating a bit in the morning, it was still warm, and then you get rained on. And this might just be a me thing. And I was like, oh, I could really smell myself, you know. And then I got out, and I was like, I went to Bunnings and put deodorant on, and went to the other job, and literally it was like under an hour job. Put some deodorant on. I was like, geez, I hope I don't smell it very bad. I'm sure I probably did. Not much you can do about it, but it's just that, like, you're just wet and yuck. Anyway, that smell is how I feel when I think about the story that you're going to bring to me tonight, Cameron.
As you were telling that story, I was thinking, gee, how much of this am I going to have to cut out when I edit this? Because so far, I have no idea where he's going, but you brought it back around to be somewhat relevant to the topic of the news, which I'm sure you've read the headline of this. You know what we're talking about. We're talking about Warner Music and Spotify. They've announced a new multi-year agreement which covers both recorded music and music publishing. We have a few thoughts on this one. So this one could be quite a lengthy discussion around it. We'll give you as much information as we can as well, while still being homebrewed, where we don't really give you all of the facts and figures, but we give you all the facts and figures that we are aware of, and ones that we can comprehend to be able to give back to you. But yeah, it's a new multi-year agreement. This is, the article I read was published on Spotify's website, so make of that what you will as well when I'm reading this through. But they said, through the deal, the two companies strengthen their joint commitments to artists, songwriters, and fans, as well as the growth of the music ecosystem through innovative collaboration. They'll work together to shape the future of audio-visual streaming and enhance the value of music, which I found quite interesting. The new deal will help deliver new fan experiences, a deeper music and video catalog, further paid subscription tiers, and differentiated content bundles. I'm really keen to break that point down because all of that is quite fascinating to me. But they go on to say that the agreement will build on the company's existing alignment and artist-centric royalty payments. Cue for laughs. They have a new publishing agreement as well with the licensing model with Warner Music in several additional countries, including the US, reinforcing songwriters' benefit in this evolving ecosystem. So yeah, in short, it's a multi-year agreement covering both recorded music and music publishing. One of the things that I quite found funny was enhance the value of music. We've obviously spoken about on the news before and with a couple of interviews as well, how streaming has cheapened our relationship with music and therefore the value of music. But they're saying that this new deal will enhance the value of music.
Yeah, and like value, like I mean, even that the way that you're speaking about it there, the value is more like I suppose less tangible. The tangible value of music as well, strengthen and enhance that. I saw someone comment with relation to this deal, or it was more in the so that they've struck one with Warner, they've struck a similar one with Universal Music, and they said the best way to to enhance the value of music would be to pay artists more, not come up with an entire new model that allows them to make more money, which we're going to get into without jumping the gun too much. But yeah, it's a whole bunch of PR gobbledygook on my end.
Can you say that word again, please?
PR gobbledygook.
Gobbledygook. How is that spelled? Can I have that in? I've already had it in a sentence.
Because
I don't
you
know,
can
I was
turn
gonna
to
go
Guy
spell it.
Montgomery's spelling bee, but less funny.
Such a good show. Side tangent. Very good show. Very
Incredible
funny.
incredible show. But yeah, this is very interesting, right? Because it sounds like we're looking at a glimpse of what the future of streaming will actually be, like it or not. And we're ready, loaded with our Rotten Tomatoes to give it a whole bunch of criticism. That aside, this is probably where we're headed when it comes to streaming, regardless of what we complain about.
Yeah, sorry. I was almost caught when you said Rotten Tomatoes. I was like, oh, that's how the website got its name. Like it just suddenly clicked and made sense as to why the website, the movie review website was called Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it actually, I was aware of it, but I didn't really mean to make the connection when I said Rotten Tomatoes. It just came out that way.
Well,
But that's, yeah.
It worked. It worked for me, so I appreciate it. But yeah. So enhance the value of music, whether or not this deal will do that or not, I don't know. But new fan experiences a deeper music video catalog. So it sounds like Spotify will be leaning a bit further into music videos. Which, if you scroll through new releases, like you may be looking at the Homebrewed Select Spotify playlists, which I would recommend you do. Link will be in the description or the show notes of this podcast. But when you look through, there's a lot more that has video attached to it, where they have the film clip. And we spoke about this when it was first discussed, and we both said, yeah. Yeah. I think that was pretty much the vibe we had. It was, yeah, look, if I'm wanting to show someone a film clip and we're listening to the song, I'll probably use Spotify to do it as opposed to leaving it, going to YouTube and Googling it. But for my commute where I'm just listening to music, or if I'm at home listening to music, I probably just prefer the lyrics on my TV or just my blank screen on my phone as opposed to watching the film clip for every video. But it looks like, based on this deal, that they are going to be diving a little bit deeper into music videos and having more video content on Spotify.
Yes, it does. And I mean, like, we have started putting our more video content up as well. It seems to be the way that things are going in terms of how we like to consume things. So that all makes sense. What interested me in what you were saying there as well was paid subscription tiers and differentiated content bundles. Now, if we're to rewind to our chat with Montaigne, which we had a few weeks back now, Montaigne, a fantastic Australian artist who has made the leap to independence because they did not want to be subject to the various controls that come with being signed to a label. That happened via Patreon, which we're seeing a lot of artists doing. And in that conversation, Montaigne actually foreshadowed this, saying that, yeah, apparently Spotify are basically trying to just take the Patreon model and absorb it into themselves. And that's exactly what I'm getting from that. Now, I mentioned that there was a Universal Music Group and a Warner Music Group deal announced thus far. Both of those, they've kind of had these terms, but they haven't actually detailed what these things are going to look like. But the expectation amongst everybody that has had a look and tried to interpret what they are saying is, yes, we're headed towards a setup where maybe if you pay a little bit more, you get early access to music from your favorite artists via Spotify. And when we say content bundles, you know how maybe on your favorite artist website, they might have, okay, Cam, I think you might have got one recently for somebody. Say it's the Moving Stills from the Central Coast. They would sell you a Wabi Sabi vinyl along with a Moving Stills shirt, along with a sticker and some socks or something like that. Like that's a content
Or a tote
bundle.
bag or
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's something that was very much artist led, very much a way of people getting more money for their staff via their own websites, via their own team, whatever else. And also, I understand it's also how like some of the biggest artists in the world use it to like up the so platinum and ultra platinum or whatever it is determined by sales. And when you sell a bundle that has say 5 items in it, it's like counted as 5 sales. So you can go platinum or gold or whatever faster because your sales related to that record have been higher because you're selling other stuff. So all of these things are how it works. But the way we understand it, and probably most of our listeners do, is just like, yeah, your favorite artist is doing this, they're selling you some merch, they're doing whatever. And we've spoken forever and a day about one of the best ways to support artists is by buying merch from them and things like that, because that's money that goes in their pockets. And now it looks like Spotify, in an attempt to strengthen the value of music, are basically just trying to skim off the top of that as well.
Well, we even spoke about, it was over 6 months ago, we were talking about Spotify and they're going to start selling concert tickets. That's like a next move because they're already advertising shows near you. Oh, look, they'll probably do merch as well. And now all of this seems to be coming to a fold where it looks like paid subscriptions and differentiated content bundles. That is the Patreon method. You pay, and depending on what tier you are paying for, you get a different content bundle, you get a different set of rewards, you get a different set of benefits. However you want to look at it, that to me is a Patreon method. Now that we've established that that's what that is, how do you feel about Spotify offering this? Because like you mentioned, it will likely include, if you pay more money, you will be the first to hear the new single from your favorite bands, or how's it going to work? Because if you just pay more money, do you just get early access to every single song? Are you paying early money for a select few artists and then the artists get a little bit more money? Is it because this is a Warner Music Group deal? If, Warner Music signed artists, you get early access to that. How do you think this will work, around who gets the early access, and how do you feel that a company like Spotify are now diving into this world?
In a word, it's shithouse, I think, but predictable as well, I guess. Like, it's like that whole thing, right? I remember reading this article, like literally maybe like 15 years ago, about where Facebook was headed. And it was somebody that had like really just, I don't even know how I found this, but they'd really looked at how Facebook had evolved over time and realized that, yes, that they were gearing up to basically become like your internet homepage. So you would have a messaging service. You would be able to see what your friends are doing. You would be able to shop from it. There'd be a marketplace function. There'd be an events function, blah, blah. And this is like, a long time ago. And so that's exactly what happened. Facebook grew and it eventually evolved and enveloped all of these other functions of the internet and put them all in one place, which is super convenient, but obviously has a lot of implications for, monopolization and all of the things that come with that, and the fact that it's all under one roof and data and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This feels like what Spotify's play has probably been for some time. And you might have heard of the term streaming 2.0, which is kind of referenced in relation to these deals. And that revolves a lot around these things. It's about enveloping all of the different tentacles of music, which are videos, tickets for gigs, merchandise, hard copy sales, and streams, etc. Whatever else they can, they're trying to bring it all under one roof and therefore control the sale of all of it, which I guess makes sense from a business perspective, but it does not excite me, and it doesn't feel like a good thing for artists.
Yeah, so to clarify, the reason you said shithouse is because it monopolizes the market and it's likely taking money or a potential revenue stream for artists away.
Correct. I'm
Yeah.
currently wearing a Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever shirt. I bought this off of their website from them. That, or maybe, you know, whoever made it got a cut, whatever. If I had bought this off Spotify, how does that distribution then work? And I can't imagine the
they
same
receive
amount.
less.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100% they receive less because the appeal that Spotify will make with this is the same appeal they have with their music is where, you know, the biggest streaming company in the world, where they will probably be saying we're the largest music platform in the world. If you want people to buy your merch, you need to put it on our platform because we're seen by millions and millions across the world. Think about how many more people you could reach by putting your merch or putting, you know, your exclusive premiere, if you want to, whatever it works out to be, on Spotify, because we're the place where people who listen and enjoy music, that's where they live. We're on their home screen. We're a touch away and you can make money. That's definitely going to be their pitch. But I agree with you with the whole monopolization of the market. It is going to hurt the artist pockets in the end. And yes, there's a little bit of convenience there for us as a consumer. But really, if you're going to buy the shirt anyway, you probably would make the effort to go to the artist website. You probably would Google the artist and, you know, because I'm not just going to get a shirt for any old, unless maybe the design's really, really cool. But more or less, like, if you're wearing a band shirt, it's part of like an identity thing. It's like, yes, I like this band, I like these artists. And anyone who recognizes the shirt will recognize, hey, we're part of a community because we both like Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever, or, you know, whatever the case is. That's, I think, one of the joys about wearing band merch is it's like, hey, we're all part of this community. It's the same reason when I go to a live show, I try to buy a shirt with the dates of you know, their tour on the back, because it's cool for me to remember the exact date that I was there, but also you see someone else rocking a shirt from the same tour, you're like, oh, we're probably at the same gig. How cool. It's a really cool connection thing. And I'm not saying that's going to be taken away if Spotify do this, but I just think it's them capitalizing on a tool because they know it can make them money when they're relying on human beings being lazy, I think, to be able to do it. Because like I said, if I wanted, you know, a Teenage Dad's merch, I would go to their website and buy it. If it pops up on Spotify, I'd probably go, oh yeah. But if you know, if you're not aware really of how much less of a cut it will likely be for the artist, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the common person would look at that and go, oh yeah, it's a, you know, Rolling Blackouts shirt. What's the difference? But there probably would be a difference, and Spotify are capitalizing on that a little bit.
For sure. And we don't know how it's going to look. Like, are they going to say, well, yeah, you can sell it on Spotify or via Spotify. You might get more people engaging with your merch that way. And as a result, you are bound to sell it only via Spotify. You can't sell it on your website. But I think you're on the money with that kind of parochialism that comes with loving a band. It's a community. You're part of that community there. And we spoke in the last music news in the wake of the very disappointing Hottest 100 results that the things that we really can't control that put things in front of our face, like algorithms, are not giving us enough Australian music. And one of the things that I thought was frustrating was like, yeah, we can say, go stream your favorite artists, buy their merch, do this, but it requires that kind of like extra step to go and do that thing that even the best of intentioned people will eventually probably, you know, it's only going to maybe get 10% of people and the rest of people would like that and they just don't, or whatever else, because the algorithms just throw things in front of us and we kind of just go down that path. So I didn't see it as a great solution. What might be different about this example is that we make a decision to buy an item of clothing, for example, and you make that decision on an emotional and personal level for a band. Yeah, you are probably more likely to then, you're going to have to make a step anyway. So make that step for a band that you love. If you care about them and their music, you're probably going to think, okay, what's the best way to support them? Then it's going to be jumping on their website maybe and doing it in a way that puts more money in their pocket. But for all of those people, there will probably still be more that then just use the Spotify link. And maybe that's more sales. Maybe it will work out better for artists as well. But you're going to need to rely on that passion from people and that real care to take those extra steps, and buy it in a way that puts more money in their pockets.
And do you know what else I can see? I can see Spotify doing Spotify exclusive merch. Similar to if you go to buy a vinyl record, it would have, JB Hi-Fi exclusive purple vinyl. I can see Spotify doing exclusive merch on Spotify, or as part of their content bundles, at the highest tier, you'll get, a free piece of merch every 12 months. And because you're part of the bundled tier, it's all, adding up to it. And the content bundles and bundling subscriptions is something that Spotify are doing very well. And it's clearly a deliberate thing that they are doing, because in 2024, as of March 2024, Spotify had successfully migrated more than 99% of its subscribers into bundled packages in the US market. So that started in March 2024, and this includes duo plans, family plans, all of that. 99% of its US market are in those bundle plans.
So,
meaning only 1% have individual Spotify plans.
Interesting. So what's the benefit for Spotify in that? Because I would say from the outset, it seems like I'm part of a family plan for my Spotify with a group of friends and my housemates. It's much cheaper for me, but I would be paying them more money anyway, if not for this family plan.
I think part of the benefit would be you'd have people who would normally be on a free subscription and now included in a bundle. So they're paying their minimal, $4 a month or whatever it is. But I think the other part of it is it's harder to leave. We've discussed this too, between us. I was thinking about leaving Spotify and, maybe trialing Apple Music or something different. But me and my wife are on a duo plan. If I want to leave, that means either she loses her Spotify account as well, or I need to convince her to join me to another platform, or I'm just paying for the Duo account as well as a different subscription service, and that doesn't make sense. So I think part of this plan was to make it harder for people to leave.
It does. That makes complete sense, actually, when you lay it out like that. And when you piece all these things together, I think it just becomes a scary, predatory proposition, right? Because we just spoke about how they're trying to lump in all of these arms of the music economy into one place. And then at the same time, they're trying to lump in every human being that uses them into a more entrenched position where it's much harder to leave. And those things combined, I just feel like is a pretty scary proposition as to what this company is attempting to and will probably succeed at doing, much in the same way that Facebook has. Although regular listeners to the music news would probably remember my obsession with this idea of the rot economy, which last year, which is this idea that our tech kind of tech products, I suppose you could call them, like Spotify, like Facebook, eventually reach a point where the pursuit of profit means the quality of service deteriorates because advertising makes them the most money. So we're seeing that happen with Facebook. It's just shitter than it was. And I think most people would agree with that, but they make more money because they fit more ads into your Instagram feed. They fit more ads into your Facebook feed. They fit less relevant content and actually made the user experience worse in an effort to make more money, knowing that they're still probably going to keep people using it anyway out of addictive habit or FOMO or whatever else. Is this the course for Spotify as well? So they add these features that, like ultimately is convenient. Yes, does make sense, whatever else, but is really bad for artist independence, artists making money, whatever else. Will it reach a point where their pursuit of ever-increasing profits means that the quality of experience does start to go downhill? And what does that mean? Like, are we witnessing the death spiral of Facebook beginning? Or is it just going to stay shit with people using it? You know what I mean?
I think the key difference that you're talking about with the rot economy and Spotify is that all of these features are designed to enhance the experience of the user. It's just the cost is, as you mentioned, for the artists. We, the consumer, are benefiting in a sense that our subscription is getting us more on Spotify. We get audiobooks, we get podcasts, we get music, now we're going to at paid subscription tiers and differentiated content bundles, but we're going to be getting more exclusive features or more access to the musicians. No doubt subscription prices will go up, but we're paying for this and the content and the features are improving. Whereas, Instagram baking more ads, that's completely irrelevant to me. The consumer is losing in that agreement. Instagram is winning. I feel like this is Spotify and the consumer winning, but crucially, it's the artist who is losing in this new arrangement. So there's certainly a connection to be made. But I still think, the usability of the app is still quite good. And that is why I couldn't talk my wife into leaving, because she likes the algorithm. She likes how the Discover Weekly content is tailored to her taste. And Spotify Wrapped, we've spoken about, is still a huge draw card for Spotify. So they're doing a lot of things right on the consumer front. They're bundling people up. They're making it harder to leave. But all of these things, when you look at it from a bit of a cynical mindset, you start to go, "Ooh, how's the morality of a company like Spotify when they're paying artists less, they're making more profits, and they're sort of, doing it's not underhanded, I don't think, but it's certainly questionable the intent."
It kind of is. I suppose it's not underhanded, but it does just feel like, okay, it's like it just feels like the claws of capitalism will catch you no matter how fast you run or no matter how many new pathways you find. They're going to follow you, they're going to get ahead of you, and they're going to take over it. And it's like we had this thing where we've had the trajectory of music consumption where it went pretty funky for a bit and everyone was downloading, and I suppose that was good for the consumer, bad for the artist. Streaming came along as a solution, and that's kind of evidently ended up still bad for the artist, marginally better. And then we were entering this kind of brave new world where things like Patreon had popped up, and there were more ways to independently support artists and put money directly in their pocket. And this whole system was crafted where there's tiers of support and there's bundles, and you get early access and you get advantages for subscribing to a particular artist where 95% or 90% of the money goes to them. And then just as soon as it arrived, here comes Spotify with their version of it to say, okay, great idea, thanks for that. We're just going to bundle that all into our service now, which 500 million people already pay for. And there goes your independent stream of revenue, or an easier way. You know what I mean? It's like we've taken that now. That's ours. And so no matter how fast you run, no matter how good your idea is, they're just going to come and take it.
Yeah, I mean that's all big tech. Like you look at Instagram Reels, that was because of TikTok. You look at Instagram Stories, that was because of Snapchat. They take the best features from a successful platform and they go, oh, we can incorporate that into our app, or we can incorporate that into our business model. And that's very much what all the successful companies are doing. Just quickly, a few last points on this deal. You might be thinking, why is Spotify striking deals with record labels? Part of it is because Spotify was facing pushback from labels because Spotify's royalty saving measures. And obviously, we saw Universal pull all of their music off TikTok in a dispute with TikTok. There were, I don't know how close it ever became. I can't imagine it was that close, but no doubt there were discussions and threats held that we're going to take all of our artist music away off Spotify. I feel like Spotify was maybe too powerful for that to actually become an eventuation, because suddenly you have an artist, regardless whether they're Taylor Swift or whether they're an emerging artist who is sort of signed to, a record label. If that label isn't publishing on Spotify, they're suddenly less relevant, culturally. And then, it just, that's the thing with Spotify. They've just become this absolute behemoth where you have to put your music there, despite how much it costs an artist to put music on Spotify. Yes, if you didn't know, artists have to pay to put their music on Spotify, and then we have to pay to stream the music, all the while Spotify are getting money both from the artist and from us, and then also paying that artist absolute fuck all, really, in comparison to Anyway, that's a completely different tangent. But yeah, so Spotify, they face pushback from labels. And obviously then now they get a little bit more control as well with these deals because they get to everything we mentioned, paid subscription tiers, differentiated content bundles. Yeah, they have a bit more control over everything, really, when it comes to the music because these are writing deals, these are publishing deals, recorded music and music publishing. So they're certainly not a mistake. It's not silly on their behalf. I'm trying to think from a label's perspective what they get out of it. And obviously, there's some details in the deal which make it worth their while.
Well, I suppose this all ultimately comes down to licensing. So labels grant Spotify the right to use their licensed music, which they own. And I suppose the more exposure and streams, like the streams go to the label. The stream royalties go to the label. The label usually pays the artist in this instance. So I suppose if they can negotiate the best deal for their catalogue of music, then the royalties go there.
Well, my other, there was a lot said about Sabrina Carpenter being auto-played at the end of your own playlist or listening to an album or whatever it was. Maybe there's some other agreement where, because we have a deal, make sure that it's a Universal artist or make sure that it's a Warner Music Group artist that's played at the end. That could also be part of, their deals and their thinking around that as well.
Yeah, and just on all of this, right, like we are like complaining and we think this is shit, right? The company, the profit-driven company is going to do what the profit-driven company is going to do. It's going to seek out the best way to make more profits. And ultimately that results in things like monopolization and whatever else. That's how they make most money. It's rational self-interest. It's economics 101. But the best way and the only way that these things could be addressed is legislation. And this is where we actually need governments, regulatory bodies who are in control of these things and how they play out in certain countries to step in and say, okay, you can't just absorb the music economy in my country. That's not allowed. We used to have, for example, media ownership laws in Australia that meant you could only own print or radio and TV, or print and TV. You couldn't own all three, which, has all been done away with. And as a result, we have a monopolized industry. The only way that we can stop these in the current system under which we live is by governments actually doing something about it and stopping it and stepping in to protect artists, which, is not happening at the moment. But that's probably where we should be directing our attention, because that's how you affect change. Of course, you can vote with your dollar in your feet. If you don't like what you see, then maybe it's best to direct your money elsewhere. And there's a consideration that I'm grappling with more and more the more we speak about Spotify. As a Spotify user, and it is a good service, but it's kind of gets harder and harder to justify the more you explore these issues.
That's the thing. We talk about all the negatives to everything they're doing, but at the end of the day, as a Spotify user, really, it's nothing but positives. In a sense that, like I mentioned, you get podcasts, you get audiobooks, you're likely now to get extra content from artists that you love. There's a lot of upsides to having a Spotify account, and this podcast we distribute through Spotify for podcasters, or at least that's what it used to be called. It's now Spotify for creators or whatever they rebranded it to.
Freaking name change.
It was Anchor originally when we signed up, and then Spotify bought Anchor, and now we both use Spotify as users for music, audiobooks, used to for podcasts. I've recently got a new podcasting app, which I'm really excited about, which I've heard about a lot, but I never actually really used it. And at Pocket Casts. So shout out to Pocket Casts for making a good podcasting app. But yeah, we both use Spotify. I don't know. Can we say we like Spotify? Maybe we like the app, but we're questionable about the company. I don't know.
I like it as a product. It is a good product. Wrapped is one of my favorite times of the year. I get more excited about it than Christmas because of what it tells me about listening and what it curates for me and whatever else. However, we both share serious concerns about what it actually, the implications of the product. We like the product has implications that are bad.
Yeah, and I don't know anything about Daniel Ek, who's the founder and CEO of Spotify. He's not, Musk levels yet. Whether he gets there or not, I don't know. But what he's doing, the amount of profit they make, just pay artists more.
Yeah,
that's all. That's all we really want to see. You can do all the innovation. You can, some of the anti-consumer type, competition stuff that we're seeing with signing deals with record labels, that could be questioned as well. But ultimately, as long as the experience is good and artists aren't being ripped off, that's where I would be comfortable landing. At the moment, the product's good, artists are getting ripped off. So that needs to be fixed. And as you were saying, Eamon, feels like government could be a good solution to try and fix this, but then can you really rely on any government at the moment to be competent enough to actually put forward a plan to a company like Spotify and actually get change done?
Well, we are actually about to speak about some good government decisions, I suppose. But as a final note on this, I do think there is just a glare. Like we spoke about the parochialism of music fans and how much they, if you really love music, you love the songs, but you develop a connection with the artist as well. And we've spoken about that, with Luke Bevins, for example, and why vinyl's become so popular again. There is a hole in the market, and I don't run corporations, but I feel like there is a hole in the market where all you would have to do is have a good product and say, I also pay artists way better than the other ones. And all of those parochial music fans who love music and love their artists too would go, thank fuck, this is what I want. I want something that I can feel good about using, but with the ease of use as other streaming services have. I feel like that gap exists and no one's filling it.
I agree the gap does exist. I just don't know whether enough people would jump on that, because 99% of Spotify users in the US are on bundled plans. It is hard to leave. How many people are going to pay their Spotify subscription on top of another subscription to a more ethical, shall we say, organization who pays artists more fairly? Whilst I think on paper it's great, I just don't. There are people who would obviously do it, but I don't know if there's enough people to do it to warrant the startup costs, the cost of striking deals with all the labels and artists, and I don't know. Like, I would love it. I'm with you, but just, I don't know, trying to take on Spotify at this rate, it feels like if Spotify are going to lose customers, it's because of something they have done as opposed to something that another competitor is doing, because Spotify are already offering plenty.
Yeah, which is fair. Definitely fair. Yeah, I don't know. What would you do? Would you change? Would you jump ship if you had a better option and one that paid more ethically? We've had fun listener feedback over some of these topics in the past. So message us on our Instagram. Tell us what you reckon if you do feel strongly about this. But I'm going to take this opportunity to shout us out as we transition from story to story, right? We've been having a bit of this lately in our music news in particular. Without really meaning to, we've kind of spoken about the context of a lot of these bigger stories over various music newses in the last several years, but the last, say, 12 months, for example, the hottest 100, we kind of spoke independently about each factor in the separate music news stories over that 12-month period. And we've done a similar thing with Spotify in the past, and we've done a similar thing with the story we're about to talk about, which is about pill testing in Victoria. So if you do want background, it's there. And we didn't really mean for it to work out this well, but we've been kind of laying the groundwork, speaking about these issues individually, and eventually speaking about what they end up forming collectively. So go back through our catalogue if you are curious about any more context to any of these stories, because guaranteed you're going to find something of relevance in the not too recent past, not too distant past. Not too recent past.
Yeah, it's from like 6 years ago. Yeah. We're proper Nostradamus at that point. But no, because like you mentioned at the start of the Spotify story, right? These are things that we've discussed. These are the trends that we could see happening. And, we've been doing this for over 7 years now. So we've been engaged, at least on a national level, certainly on a local level, with all trends that are happening with music in this country. We can, we speak, I think the bigger part of this is we speak to a lot of artists and we speak to a lot of people in the industry who are far more knowledgeable than us. We're just fortunate enough to be in the position where we can speak to a lot of people from different backgrounds, and we can sort of piece it all together and use that to put forward our own opinions and help us inform what's actually going to happen moving ahead, as opposed to us just being brilliant people with great minds and these are all of our own opinions.
Oh,
These are
yeah,
opinions
no.
that we have formed by discussions with very intelligent and knowledgeable people, both, brain intelligence. That's not a word, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just proving my point right now. But, people who have the smarts and people who have the lived experiences in the industry. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. I like the first way, but yes, I agree. We are the sum
They've
of the
got
parts,
brains.
and the parts are all the people we've spoken to over the years, or all the stories that we've covered.
Yes.
But yeah, we are going to speak about another one that we've covered in a lot of depth pretty much since we began, because it's been an ever-present issue. And the lead on this is that 4 more festivals are going to be conducting pill testing this year in Victoria. Now, if you do want to go back and listen to the New South Wales perspective, we did at the start of the year have Chris Minns, this is one of the first few days of January, announced that his government will launch a $1 million 12-month trial of pill testing this year in 2025. So you can listen to that in a bit more detail. But I think what's interesting about what's happening in Victoria is that we've had these more festivals announced that are going to have pill testing there. But what I also found when I was looking at this story was that the data from their first ever pill testing service, which took place at Beyond the Valley over New Year's, is available and out there. And this has been out there for a little while now. So it's semi-old news, I suppose, but I hadn't seen it nor heard it. And hopefully the same thing is for you as well. So we'll start with the 4 more music festivals that have been announced for the pill testing trial. Now, when Victoria did announce its pill testing trial, it was going to include 10 events over the 2024-25 festival season. We've had Beyond the Valley. Now we've got an additional 4. So we're halfway there. The additional 4 are going to be Hard Mission Festival, which has already actually taken place a couple of days ago at time of recording. Pitch Music and Arts, which happens next month, March 7th to 11th. Crucially and tragically, last year at that event, I was at that event, somebody did die of a drug overdose. So, this is a place where it could really help. Ultra Music Festival, which occurs on April 12th, and the Warehouse Project, which occurs on April 25th.
Tell you what, that wouldn't be happening in New South Wales because the government are wanting to ban live music on Anzac Day.
That's right. That was a music news story from last year, wasn't it?
It was. That's why I mentioned it. But yeah, see, we're on the pulse of these things. But obviously it can take place in Victoria. But
that's just some interesting, okay, these are festivals that are going to occur at. If you are heading to any of these festivals, like for example, Pitch, I can only speak of my experience, but I know of a lot of people from our area on the Central Coast that also attend that event. So there's relevance there. I'm not just talking fluff. But what I did find really interesting was the data that came out of it, because they did the Beyond the Valley trial, which is a New Year's festival. It happens in regional Victoria every year. It's a big multi-day festival with a lot of young people going there and, of course, taking drugs at these events, which happens. So they had the data from it. Healthcare staff spoke to more than 700 festival goers at Beyond the Valley, mainly aged in their late teens and early 20s. And in that drug checking service, over 600 samples were tested, which is, a lot. And this is, I suppose, what's really crucial about this, another positive. Yes, harm reduction, that's the number one positive and should be the priority. But from these services, we get data. We get really useful data that governments can use, that health services can use to help target whatever, whether it's funding, whether it's understanding what's being circulated, where or how it's being circulated, whether it's understanding attitudes that young people have towards drugs or where they might need to improve education, where they might need to improve health or support services, et cetera, et cetera. This is all data that they're able to get, which is very representative of a certain group of people that they could not get otherwise. So that's one really, really big an important part of it as well. I've already said 700 festival goers were spoken to and over 600 samples were tested in the first two little data points there.
Yeah, and I guess expectedly, the most frequently tested drugs were MDMA, ketamine, and cocaine. Any of those a surprise to you, or as expected?
As expected, I would say,
Yeah.
for sure, that those are floating around. What was really nice, I suppose, and positive is that the service did not discover any highly dangerous substances that would necessitate a public alert in those 600 samples. There were instances of lower level detections where one drug had been sold as another substance. Now, I don't know if this was it, but an example that came to mind when I read that could be ketamine being sold as cocaine. Now, if that was the case, that could lead to a very bad experience for the person who thinks they're getting cocaine and ends up having ketamine, because they're vastly different kind of effects as a drug. So that's an immediate positive there. That could result in like a traumatic experience for somebody that may have been avoided if that was the case. But either way, when you buy something and it's something else, usually you don't have a better time. You know, in that instance, usually it's not good. So that is a really good thing that we had that straight off the bat. That could be a potentially traumatic experience that was avoided, and education that was gained by someone.
Yeah, and that's the key point behind this, right? It's education. It's the conversations that take place with the 700 festival goers about, you know, not just, you know, getting it tested and being informed about what's in it, but there is also a conversation, there is knowledge shared in that tent about what's in the drug. And actually, almost 40% of patrons said they would use a lower dose of their drugs after having a conversation with health professionals testing their substances, according to preliminary data, which I think when you read that, as well, you know, there's obviously the benefits of actually getting the data, but when you have that written down as well, you think, well, you know, all the things that we've spoken about that, you know, from trials and testings that have taken place around the world, these are the benefits of having the testings there. Is people are going to take lower doses, which means less likely for overdose, less likely for poisonings as well, because, you know, they were tested and there was no, you know, highly dangerous or toxic chemicals in what they were taking. So that's also, I think, another positive.
Yeah, 100%. It's just having the opportunity to have these conversations with people who are using it, who might not have had access to harm reduction, you know, like sound advice on drug use generally from health professionals in the past. And that's the thing, when you go into these drug checking services, it's not like, hey dude, that looks like some good stuff, go have fun with it. It's like a healthcare professional trained in the field who's going, hey, this is what's in here. This is how you should do it safely if you are going to do it. I would recommend your dose be this, you know, like all of these ways that you can more safely consume this if you are going to make that call. But ultimately, they advise you against using it altogether. But it's an opportunity for an intervention, for a conversation. And as you said, Cam, that could easily have meant that we didn't have, you know, more overdoses or anything like that occur, because of those 600 people or 700 people, there was conversations had and then actions changed.
Yeah, and also the preliminary data has indicated more than 70% of patrons said it was the first time they actually had a judgment-free discussion with a health professional about drug and alcohol use. So it's also, you know, here's the information, here's the data, here's the knowledge. You know, make your own choices, and you know, are ultimately responsible for that. But we're trying to give you all the tools and resources available to make the best choices, and hopefully it's reduced harm.
Totally. And yeah, it's just so good to have these opportunities and points for education and also points for actually gathering data. There's also a really interesting one as well. Multiple instances of patrons who are prescribed antidepressants seeking advice about MDMA. And the issue there is if you are taking an antidepressant and you do take MDMA in too high an amount or the wrong combination, it can lead to serotonin syndrome. I believe that's kind of where your body stops producing serotonin naturally. I'm actually just going to look it up. I'm sorry.
Okay, because the way you were speaking, I was like, "Oh, good, he's got it. He knows what this is, and is going to inform me." Because I was going to ask, "What is serotonin syndrome?"
I thought I've had conversations about this in the past, but I'm not confident enough on it. It's a serious. This is from the Mayo Clinic. A serious drug reaction caused by medications that build up high levels of serotonin in the body. So I suppose an antidepressant will be one of those things that provides you with serotonin. It can occur when you increase the dose of certain medications or start taking a new drug. Symptoms include agitation, restlessness, insomnia, confusion, rapid heart rate, high blood pressure, loss of muscle coordination or twitching muscles, heavy sweating, diarrhea, headache, shivering, goosebumps. Severe serotonin syndrome can be life-threatening as well. So that's not exactly what I thought it was. I'm glad I looked that up. But it's really good that, again, in terms of education, people who are taking antidepressants are able to get advice on whether or how they should use MDMA or whether they should use it at all, and avoid potentially developing serotonin syndrome in that process as well.
Yeah, and Victoria's Health Minister Mary Ann Thomas hailed the trial as a success, and she touched on the deeper conversations about health and well-being that took place in those tents. Cameron Francis, who's the chief executive of non-profit The Loop Australia, who actually ran the trial, he said that they had people lining up waiting to have their drugs tested well before they were ready to open, and said that the younger crowd were more receptive to their advice, likely because they're fairly naive and relatively inexperienced using drugs. And when you look at a festival crowd, more often than not, we've already mentioned the age demographic, but late teens, early 20s. It is crucial to saving their lives to have these sorts of pill testing happening at these festivals, because they are inexperienced, they're naive, and we've all been in situations where peer pressure has made you do something you might look back later and go, "Fuck, that was dumb."
Yeah.
And the last thing you want is for that peer pressure experience where you go, "Fuck, that was dumb," to be overdosing at a festival.
Yeah.
When you could have had something like this to avoid it.
Yeah, 100%. There'd be so many people out there who go, wow, I guess, well, there'd be a situation where they know they probably got a bit lucky, or someone they knew got a bit lucky with something where it could have easily gone south because services like this weren't available. So it's, literally life-saving stuff here. And the butterfly effect of this, you can't really overstate, because this could have avoided a lot of heartache, even though there was no really toxic stuff that they found. Just these conversations alone could have really, really changed the course of some people's experiences at that festival, or even down the track, or people that they've then gone shared that information with. And the data that's gathered from these things could also have a very similar effect in terms of targeting the right things and doing the right things from a government perspective. Now, it wasn't without its issues. I don't know. I don't even know what you call this. I think this is just political point scoring, which I think is just stupid.
Yeah.
But anyway, the opposition, the Victorian opposition mental health spokeswoman Emma Keeley, labelled the trial as botched after an overdose occurred on the first day of Beyond the Valley. Now, I don't know if that means it's botched. I don't think anyone said this is going to stop overdoses occurring, and you also can't force somebody to either take the advice if they had attended the pill testing facility or go there in the first place. And we don't know if the person, a man in his 20s who ended up okay, thankfully, who attended the festival, was treated for a drug overdose at Geelong Hospital. No information was available on whether he used the service, as punters were not asked to provide their names or other details, which is a big part of pill testing because it's dealing with illegal drugs. So it's worth including that note, but I just thought you're just trying to score political points off of effectively somebody's overdose, which I didn't think was very high caliber politics. But as we mentioned earlier, we haven't come to expect that, have we?
No, because I mean, look, this is the argument, right? You have someone who went to the festival, they ended up in hospital with a drug overdose. There's no evidence to say that he went and had that pill tested. Doesn't mean he didn't, doesn't mean he did. There's just they don't know whether he did or didn't. How do we look at that now? Do we say there was pill testing available, he didn't go, therefore the trial was still successful because people who went had a positive experience and, there was one overdose, but there could have potentially been 5. Do we look at it that way? Or do we look at it and say, yeah, look, there was pill testing at this festival. He opted not to use it. Is that a reflection on pill testing or the trial, or can we look at it from that lens as well?
Yeah, I don't know. None of them, I probably the first one, but I just don't think we should be looking at it through either of those lens. It's like saying, oh, well, there was a fatal road crash, so your efforts at road safety are botched. And so, well, I don't think that it's ever going to be able to get fatal road crashes down to absolutely zero. However, we can definitely reduce them via 100%. Services, which is probably more aligned with the first lens that you described, Cam.
Yeah, and I think, it's aligned with, the gun debate that you hear in America. Unless we can get rid of all crime, there's no point trying to reduce gun crime, or, whatever those arguments are. I still think it's certainly a worthwhile exercise. And like I said, there could have been 5 overdoses. There just ended up being 1 on the first day. We also don't know whether the drugs were consumed at the festival. The drugs could have been taken before he entered the festival grounds, and that's when the overdose occurred, later after the fact when he was at the festival. There's a lot of unknowns around that, but like you mentioned, still I think important to include. You can make up your own conclusions as a result of that.
Yes, you can. But yeah, so that's that for that story. Just thought it was great to have a bit of
That's that for that.
That's that for that story. Great to have a bit more data, and the beauty of this is as it's rolled out more in Victoria, we're seeing the trial that we mentioned earlier happening this year in New South Wales. It's legal in the ACT and Queensland. Very soon we're going to have a nationwide body of evidence that's going to tell us a lot. And we're going to have also whole generations of people who are approaching drug use very differently and are far more educated and therefore safer. So all positive, as apart from overdoses are not positive, but all positive in terms of the way we're moving from a public health perspective, methinks.
Absolutely. Now, I know this has been going for a little while, but I do just want to quickly touch on a couple of shorter stories. We're definitely not going into as much detail on these, but obviously one of the biggest sporting events took place on Monday here in Australia. It's a Super Bowl. I couldn't really care less about the actual sport in the Super Bowl. And this is really a big note on America, that the ads is one of the biggest parts of the Super Bowl. But as is the halftime performance, Kendrick Lamar, that is, if you didn't know who I was referring to, he did the halftime performance. It was actually the first solo hip-hop performance at a Super Bowl halftime show, which I found quite fascinating. But we can link this back to the Universal chat that we were having a little bit before. He did end up playing Not Like Us. There were some debate about whether he would, whether he wouldn't. He teased it earlier in his performance, did a medley of a couple of other songs, and then came back to actually perform it. If you haven't seen it, which I'm sure you have, but the crowd singing the A minor line.
Say Drake, I hear you like I'm young. You better not ever go to cell block 1. To any that talk torment and love, just make sure you hide your little sister from them. They tell me Chubb the only one to get your hand-me-downs. Party at the party playing with his nose now. Baka got a weird case, why I see around. Certified lover boy, certified. Wop, 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 wop. I'm on them tough. Wop, 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 wop. I'ma do my stuff. Why you trolling like a, ain't you tired? Trying to strike a chord and it's probably A minor.
Quite cool. Notably, he did omit the word pedophile from the song as well. I don't know whether that was because of the ongoing lawsuit, whether that was just to try and clean up the track a little bit more for a Super Bowl audience. I'm not sure. But anyway, that Super Bowl performance, I think, was quite notable. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, and if you're a musician who's listening to this, you have likely busked in a public space. You have likely had questions raised about whether you were allowed to be there or not, and whether you had a permit or not. Maybe you were kicked out. And you probably thought, oh, I can't wait till I'm a massive musician and I don't have to worry about this anymore. Well, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. One of the biggest musicians on the planet, Ed Sheeran, was busking in India as part of his mathematics tour. He shocked fans showing up in a public space to busk on the street ahead of his show. And whilst performing, he was interrupted and shut down by the local police. In fan-captured videos circulating on social media, Ed's microphone was unplugged by an officer who seemingly didn't recognize that it was Ed Sheeran standing right in front of him. And Ed Sheeran said that they were going to play more than one song. They were only allowed to play one song. So hopefully that's enough, apparently he said. And then he took to Instagram to post on his story saying, we had permission to busk, by the way. That's why we were in that exact spot. Was planned out before. It wasn't just randomly turning up. All good though. See you at the show tonight.
The rules apply to you as well, Ed, mate. No, that is really
He had a permit. He had permission. Why'd they shut him down?
It's really funny. There's some cop who would be like, oh, shit. How did that happen?
I just thought that was, a nice, lighthearted, maybe fun story to throw in right at the end. Maybe a relatable one if you are a musician listening to this podcast and you have made it all this way in. We're over an hour of recording, so probably time for us to leave.
Grats to you. Grats to us as well. But, we'll wrap it up. We were speaking about Spotify taking on the Patreon model earlier on. We have a Patreon that isn't via Spotify. If you have liked what you've listened to and you like what we do, we know we have new listeners constantly, which is great. So if you are one of them and you like what we do and you got an extra $5 to spare a month or thereabouts to help us cover the costs of doing all this, we very much appreciate it. If you don't, we totally understand. Keep listening. It's all good on our end. But thank you, Cam.
No, thank you, Eamon. And we shall see you, if you're watching this, on, helps if I look into the lens and not the monitor of myself next to the camera. But if I look into the lens, we will see you in the next music news if you're watching this on YouTube. As Eamon picks his nose through, what are you doing?
Well, I actually went to point at my computer laptop and then I realized I wasn't recording. My computer laptop, my laptop camera, and then I realized I was actually recording off of a different camera and my finger found its way to that lens. I'm pointing at you now.
I thought you were trying to pick your nose in the camera or something, which we've had discussions about too. How do you pick your nose in the car more often than not? But anyway, that's more than enough rambling for us. Thank you for watching or listening. We will see you next time.
Adios. Did you know that this podcast episode was just shortlisted for the International Podcasting Awards held in Geneva every year? If you didn't know that, that's a problem with you. But what you should know is that this episode of Homebrewed was produced by my good friend Cameron Smith. It was recorded at Sonora Studios. All of our work takes place on Dark and Jung Country. And for more from us, you can head to www.homebrewed.au.